There are nights you'll never forget, no matter how much time passes. When you're 17, the thrill of rebellion can make you feel unstoppable, invincible, until something happens that shatters that illusion. On a seemingly normal night, my friends and I were out driving under the cover of darkness when a game of freedom turned into a fight for survival. We thought we were just chasing excitement, but instead we found ourselves being hunted. 2 cars, 1 dark street, and no way to call for help. It was a race against time, and danger was closing in. What would you do if the thrill of the chase turned into a desperate struggle for your life? Stay with me, because what happened next will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about safety and the terrifying truth that lurks in the shadows. But before we get lost in the shadows, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss out our chilling upcoming episodes. If you're enjoying our eerie stories, leave a like, drop a comment, and share the terror with others. And for even more eerie content, follow us on social media. Keep the fear alive. Thanks for joining me on this spooky journey. Now, let's dive into the nightmare. Some nights etch themselves into your memory, and one such night unfolded for me about 20 years ago. At 17 years old, I was filled with the rebellious spirit of adolescence, craving freedom under the strict gaze of my parents, who imposed a 1 a.m. curfew. My friends, Jake and Max, and I hatched a plan. We would tell our parents we were having sleepovers at each other's houses. Eager for an adventurous night, we set off in my souped-up Camaro, the engine purring like a content cat. Around 10 o'clock we hit the road, cruising aimlessly, grabbing snacks and exploring our small town. With the thrill of teenage freedom coursing through our veins, we felt invincible. As the night wore on and our youthful exuberance began to wane, we decided to embark on a 45-minute drive to a nearby tourist spot. By the time we arrived, the clock struck 2 a.m. and the novelty of our escapade was fading. Looking for something to spark our excitement again, we turned down an unlit street, the headlights of my car slicing through the darkness. What started as innocent fun quickly turned ominous. From the shadows, a car emerged, its headlights off, pulling out from a parking space and falling in behind us. Instinctively, we sensed danger. My heart began to race. Soon, we realized we weren't just being followed by one vehicle. 2 cars had taken an interest in us, engaged in a perilous game of cat and mouse. The car directly behind us began to bump our rear, causing me to swerve slightly. Panic surged as we ignored traffic signals, trying to shake them off. With no cell phones to call for help, we relied on the roaring engine of my Camaro to escape. Jake and Max were quiet, tension filling the car as we accelerated. Suddenly, the car behind us flickered its headlights on and off, a menacing signal that sent chills down my spine. The second vehicle was relentless, pushing us to speeds nearing 90 miles per hour. Adrenaline coursed through me, and I felt the grip of fear tighten. One car tried to ram us from behind, while the other aimed for my side. "Just hold on!" I shouted, pushing the accelerator to its limit, desperate for an escape. My heart pounded against my ribcage as I spotted a main highway ahead, the faint glimmer of streetlights beckoning like a lifeline. As we approached the intersection, my heart leaped when I saw 2 police cars parked nearby. "There!" I yelled, a flicker of hope igniting within me. With a burst of speed, I ran the red light, praying the officers would intervene. In a heart-stopping moment, one of the pursuers sped past us, barreling towards the police. The officers sprang into action, chasing after the black vehicle. The adrenaline rushed through me as I finally felt a glimmer of safety. As we came to a stop, the night air thick with tension, the 2 vehicles that had been tailing us vanished into the night, leaving only the patrol car in sight. Relieved but shaken, I stepped out and recounted the terrifying incident to the officer, who listened intently, his expression grave. "We'll get them," he said, radioing for backup to apprehend the culprits. It turned out the men in the black vehicles were notorious carjackers, using aggressive tactics to intimidate drivers into submission. My heart sank at the realization that we had been their targets that night. Though relieved that our encounter had helped capture the criminals, the officer issued me a speeding ticket. "You should have pulled over and secured your vehicle," he advised. I nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. In retrospect, that speeding ticket felt like a small price to pay to protect my cherished Camaro and my friends. The incident left a lasting impact on me and my friends. We became more cautious about our late-night adventures, forever marked by the understanding that danger lurked in the shadows. It also made me appreciate the role of law enforcement in keeping our community safe. In the years that followed, I kept in touch with the officer who had helped us that night. Grateful for his swift response and the subsequent capture of the carjackers, I found myself drawn to law enforcement. I decided to pursue a career in this field, enrolling in college with a major in criminal justice. That harrowing night fueled my drive to protect others from similar frightening experiences. I worked my way through the ranks, gaining valuable experience in various investigations, helping to apprehend dangerous criminals and bring justice to those who had been victimized. Looking back, I realized that night had changed the course of my life. It instilled in me a strong sense of purpose and taught me the importance of staying vigilant. The memory of that terrifying chase served as a constant reminder of the dangers that can arise unexpectedly. Today, as a seasoned police officer, I strive to protect and serve my community, knowing that every encounter has the potential to make a positive difference. Each time I recall that speeding ticket, I am filled with gratitude for the officer who turned a terrifying situation into a catalyst for my career. The lesson from that night remains clear. Vigilance is key, and sometimes the scariest experiences can lead us down a path we were always meant to follow. I work as a maintenance technician at a small business. The company operates during the day, so my shifts are overnight, which makes things easier for me since there's no one around to work around. Technically, it's a part-time job, and my hours are from 8 p.m. to midnight on weekdays. One night I showed up a little late, but I clocked in right away and started working. About an hour into my shift, as I was wiping down one of the desks, the phone at the front of the building started ringing. Since the business was closed for the night, I didn't think anything of it. I let it ring through, assuming it was just a telemarketer or a wrong number. But then it rang again, and again, and again. I knew it wasn't my boss or any of my co-workers because they would have contacted me directly on my cell if it was important. Plus, the business had shut down for the day, service ended at 6 p.m., and it was now around 9 p.m. After the fifth call, I finally walked up to the front desk to see who was calling. The caller ID said unknown. I hesitated, wondering whether to answer or just mute the phone and let it go. In the end, I chose the latter and muted it, deciding not to deal with it. I returned to cleaning the desks, figuring that whoever was calling would eventually stop. A half hour later, I had almost forgotten about the phone. By now, it was about 10 p.m., and I was upstairs in the small break room when I heard a strange sound from below, a single electronic beep. It was a noise I didn't recognize, and it immediately caught my attention. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I heard a door open and close. My heart started racing. Who could possibly be entering the building at this hour? I felt a wave of unease wash over me, but I tried to convince myself that it was probably just someone who had forgotten something and was coming back to grab it. I cautiously walked to the open stairwell and listened for a moment. "Hello, is someone there?" I called out. There was a long pause before I heard the sound of footsteps. The footsteps stopped abruptly the moment I spoke, and I felt my anxiety rise. "Hello?" I called again, my voice shaky. This time, the footsteps started moving again, slowly, toward the bottom of the stairs. I quietly leaned over the railing to peer down. There, standing at the foot of the stairwell, was the shadow of a man. He stood perfectly still, almost as if waiting for me to come closer. I froze, my pulse racing. After a few long seconds, I quickly backed away and retreated into the break room. My hands trembling, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. As I whispered to the operator, I kept my eyes fixed on the empty stairwell, hoping the man hadn't heard me. It didn't take long for the police to arrive. I could hear one officer calling out as he entered, demanding that anyone inside come forward. But there was no answer, no sound of anyone else in the building. The officer made his way upstairs, and after searching the premises, he found nothing. The mystery only deepened when they reviewed the security footage. The video showed the man standing motionless at the bottom of the stairwell for several minutes, holding a knife. What was most disturbing was that he didn't seem to know I was there at first. It wasn't until I called out that he seemed aware of my presence. Once he realized I was up there, he stood there, unmoving, as if he was willing to harm me if I came down. Just before the officer arrived, the man left through the front door, vanishing into the night. The biggest question remained, how did he have access to the building? The sound I had heard earlier, the beep, was from a key card unlocking the door. I didn't have a key card, I only had a regular metal key. The police are still searching for the man, but the whole experience has left me unsettled. I continue to work the overnight shifts, though now I'm always on edge. I just hope it was a one-time incident, but part of me can't shake the feeling that something is still out there. In the fall of 2015, during winter break from college, I found myself alone in our remote upstate New York home. It was a place of comforting seclusion, a quaint house nestled among dense woods, known for its serene beauty and at times its eerie isolation. That night, the world outside was encased in a freezing silence, only occasionally disturbed by the howling wind. I had settled into the couch, wrapped in a blanket, with the fireplace crackling softly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Netflix played quietly on the TV, and I was completely engrossed in my binge-watching. The warmth from the fire was a welcome cocoon against the biting cold outside. Little did I know, the night was about to turn from peaceful to terrifying. Without any warning, the room was plunged into darkness. The power had gone out, snuffing out the comforting glow of the fireplace and TV. My heart skipped a beat. I reached for my phone, using its weak light to navigate the pitch-black room. I fumbled through the darkness, trying to locate a flashlight, but all I found was the oppressive silence of the night. With no immediate solution to the power outage, I resigned myself to waiting for my parents to return, hoping they would fix the problem soon. I must have drifted off, as I was jolted awake by a creeping sense of dread. The room felt thicker, as though it were holding its breath. My heart pounded in my chest, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I saw a tall, menacing silhouette standing beside the couch. Suddenly, the power flickered back to life, casting an eerie, unstable light around the room. What I saw left me breathless with fear. Standing just inches away from me was a man in his mid-30s, gaunt and disheveled, his clothes stained and torn, streaked with what looked like blood. The sight was grotesque, and my first instinct was to scream, but fear had me frozen in place. The man's voice was a trembling whisper as he explained that he had been in a car accident nearby and was seeking help. His disheveled appearance and the blood on his clothes lent some credibility to his story, but my terror was palpable. I couldn't help but wonder if he was telling the truth or if there was something more sinister at play. Shaking uncontrollably, I dialed 911. My voice wavered as I described the situation to the dispatcher. They assured me that help was on the way, but the severe weather conditions had slowed their response time. I was left alone with the stranger, whose presence was growing increasingly unsettling. As the intruder moved through the living room, opening cabinets and peering behind doors, I could hardly keep my composure. I begged him to stop, my voice cracking with desperation. He seemed to be driven by a frenzied urgency that made me question his true intentions. My fear grew as I watched him, unable to predict what he might do next. Minutes felt like hours until, finally, the distant sound of sirens pierced the night's oppressive silence. The police arrived, their flashing lights casting an eerie, pulsating glow through the windows. They quickly apprehended the intruder, who was eventually identified as a man named Jason. They confirmed that he had indeed been involved in a car accident and was in a state of severe shock, which explained his erratic behavior. Despite the initial shock and fear, the police investigation revealed that Jason had managed to force entry into the house due to a vulnerability in our security, a detail that both frightened and angered me. How had he managed to break in so easily? We had always considered our home secure. The immediate aftermath was a blur of relief and anxiety. The police ensured Jason received medical attention for his injuries and transported him to a nearby hospital. My parents arrived home shortly after the police, and they were understandably shaken. We discussed the incident in detail, and it became clear that while Jason's intentions might have been to seek help, the fear and violation of our personal space were real and unsettling. In the days that followed, we took several steps to reinforce our home security, installing new locks, security cameras, and motion detectors. The incident had revealed a critical lapse in our safety measures, and we were determined to prevent anything like it from happening again. The emotional impact of that night lingered far longer than the physical changes to our home. The sense of safety that once felt like a given was now something to be actively maintained and guarded. The haunting memory of Jason's appearance, his bloodied clothes, and his unsettling presence became a constant reminder of the fragility of our sense of security. Though the immediate danger had passed, the psychological scars remained. I learned to be more cautious and aware, to trust my instincts, and to never take safety for granted. Last winter, I embarked on an 18-hour road trip to visit some college friends. To break up the long journey, I drove in 2 segments of about 9 hours each, stopping overnight at an Airbnb along the way. For the return trip, I opted for a different Airbnb, hoping to explore some new scenery. Due to heavy snowfall, my arrival was delayed, and I finally reached my destination around 9 p.m. I knew the area was small, having already seen how few significant towns dotted the route. The town where my Airbnb was located was notably smaller than the one I'd stayed at previously. It had a handful of shops lining the road, but the houses were either part of farms or quite spaced apart. When I arrived at the Airbnb, it was set far from the nearest neighbor. The exterior had a modernized cabin vibe that felt somewhat out of sync with the surrounding homes. After parking on the gravel driveway, I entered the house using the code I had received. The interior matched the pictures I had seen online, and after settling into my bedroom, I made my way to the living room. Just as I plopped down on the couch and grabbed the remote, I heard a soft tapping noise from behind me. Turning around, I was startled to see a woman outside, tapping on the window. Her unkempt hair and wild eyes gave her an unsettling appearance. Once she caught my gaze, she pointed toward the front door and walked away from the window. Still feeling a rush from the surprise, I approached the door, figuring she was just an eccentric local. Although I wasn't terrified, I didn't feel entirely at ease either. When I cracked the door open, she smiled and said she needed assistance. I hesitated, waiting for her to elaborate, but instead she repeated her request, claiming she had lost something on the road outside. Peering into the darkness, I couldn't see anything past the faint glow of the Airbnb's lights. "I'm not sure I can help with that," I replied. Her smile faded, and she reiterated her story almost word for word. "I really can't assist, sorry," I said, gently closing the door. I listened as she walked away, unsure whether she was just a harmless eccentric or if there was something more unsettling about the situation. It was certainly a peculiar welcome to this quiet town. I relaxed on the couch and watched TV until around 11 p.m. Before heading to bed, I still felt a bit on edge, making it hard to fall asleep. I remember tossing and turning for what felt like an hour before suddenly waking in the middle of the night. There was a faint noise coming from the front of the house, and in the stillness, it was hard to ignore. My mind immediately flashed back to the woman from earlier as I cautiously made my way down the hallway toward the front door. Just as I reached the door, I felt someone pushing against it from the outside. I pressed my body against the door, determined not to let whoever it was in. It felt like a struggle, and for a moment I worried that they might overpower me. But then they relented and sprinted away down the gravel driveway. I quickly locked the door and rushed to the window, trying to catch a glimpse of them, but they had already disappeared into the night. In a state of panic, I decided to gather my things and leave. I didn't want to stay in that house any longer, knowing that the police in such a small town might not be able to help. Whoever was on the other side of that door had to be connected to the woman from before. If I had gone out to assist her, or if I had woken up just a moment later, I fear I might not have made it out of that night unscathed. Have you ever faced something truly terrifying? Eerie Shadows wants to hear your story. Share your chilling experiences with us on Reddit, and together we'll uncover the eerie mysteries lurking in the shadows. If you'd like to support the channel and help us create even more terrifying content, consider checking out our Patreon or Ko-fi. Your support helps us keep the horror alive. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more bone-chilling tales like this one. Stay tuned for the next eerie episode